Welcome to Tell Me More, a hospitality data podcast. I'm Stephanie Ricca, as always, here with STR's Isaac Collazo and co-stars Jan Freitag. Hi, guys.
Hey, Steph.
Hey, Steph, what's going on?
So you may notice that we sound a little bit different because we are podcasting on location at the Hunter Hotel Investment Conference in Atlanta. And you know what? Last time we podcasted together in person was at the Alice conference, and we said, oh, everybody's optimistic. They think transactions are really going to pick up. Oh, what a difference a few months make. Am I right?
Yeah,
Definitely.
this was a couple of days after the inauguration, and everybody still felt pretty good about what was coming out of the White House. But the news kept on coming, and so I think we have a lot more uncertainty infused in the audience and in the sense that I feel here at the Hunter conference. People are just a lot less certain than they were at Alice.
Uncertainty is the buzzword of the year for sure. Jan, you were on the main stage presenting, of course, the numbers. Give us a little highlight reel, if you will, of how some of those outlooks may have changed.
Yeah, so I think the highlight is for us that we did not change our forecast. We had at the Alice Hotel Investment Conference, Amanda Height presented a forecast of 1.8%. That is still true. Since Alice, however, Oxford Economics, who drives our macroeconomic forecast, has taken down their GDP growth from expected 2.4% for this year down to 2%, and they now have a 30% odds that we will be in recession. So that has caused Calibri Labs and CBRE to take their forecast down. So Calibri is at 1.9, CBRE is at 2% for the year. That makes us still the lowest, even though they revised theirs down. So it's going to be very interesting to see where we're going to end up the year. I think at the NYU conference we will revise our forecast, and then because then we have more data under our belt. Right now there's just a lot of chatter. Tariffs have just been implemented. The conversations about Canada, it's all just starting. We just need a little bit more insights before we change our forecast. But we'll see. Maybe we're just going to stay at 1.8%.
So still, dare I say it, uncertainty. Isaac, what's your take from the first days of the conference?
Again, that uncertainty that definitely is prevalent all over the conference. Everyone I talk to asks the same thing. What are you guys thinking about in terms of all the administrative changes? And I said, well, it's hard to think about it because we don't know what will stick. Basically, again, what Jan just said. So I think that's the harder part for all of us in the forecasting. I think Mark Lamont on stage said, forecasting is difficult when times are good. It's really, 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 really difficult in this era, especially since I lead the forecasting team and I have no idea what we're going to do in June. So we'll find out. The only odd thing that I heard today was the more optimistic tone from the truest economists. I was really actually taken back by it. He had a couple of things that stood out for me. He talked about the U.S. economy, that it's not one economy, it's microeconomies. That makes sense. Same thing with our industry. You're going to hear about that in our reporting right now about how February, you have to look at almost every market to really understand what's going on. But at the same time, when he talked about consumers, he made it sound like just one big consumers and that consumers are doing fine. And I totally disagree with that. I think if you're in the lower income group and even in the middle income group, the higher prices over the last several years are really biting into your pocketbook. And you cannot be feeling confident about the future. Forget the administrative changes, just the realities of everything costing more. And I was really just taken back that I thought, again, yeah, it's perfect. That's exactly what we should look at. Microeconomies makes perfect sense. Wait a minute, consumers are just one mass group of people? No, they're not. They're micro consumers, and it really depends on what job you have and where you are in your stage in life, I think.
And that we've been talking about for a while. Jan?
I had the role of being the first presenter after the gentleman from Truist spoke, and I said, look, this was a very glass half full perspective. Yep. Let me give you the other perspective. So I think the data presentations were a lot more subdued than the macroeconomists.
And I don't think, I'm not going in with this with gloom and doom because we really don't know. But again, it's that uncertainty. But what I can say is it doesn't look fantastic. I would rather be very happy saying things are great. But you can't do that right now because every day the news is changing and you just don't know. And that alone, I think, is why people are being very cautious and really taking a step back in what we're hearing here at the Hunter Conference.
And I've talked to a lot of development executives. The Hotel News Now team has talked to a lot of them over the last couple days. And I feel like the through line from them is, hey, it doesn't get cheaper. Costs are always going up.
Yeah.
Right?
Just living in this world, much less developing hotels, is not going to become anything but more expensive as you go down the line for whatever reason. And so that seems like the long lens.
Yeah,
they
and
seem
that
to
is
be
before
taking.
tariffs have kicked in.
Right.
That is before we might have problems getting construction workers. This is
Right.
before all the rhetoric solidifies into facts. And so, being a developer in this environment, I wish you well.
Right. And hence why we're seeing consumer confidence go down. Very simple.
All right, it is data time. Isaac is going to take us through the latest performance highlights. And I know he wants to start this episode looking outside the US, which is always interesting to get that perspective to see how it flows through to what we're doing here at home. Take it away, Isaac.
Yeah, I think overall, trying to understand where we're positioned in the U.S., given everything we were talking about at Hunter, it's like really good. What's everyone else doing, right? So overall, in February, global RevPAR was up 3.9%, essentially on ADR of 2.2%. And then looking at specific countries, the highest RevPAR was in India with 19.7%, followed by, this is interesting, I'm going to have to look into this more, Mexico at 17.1%, and then Japan at 12.6%. So again, or 12.4%, excuse me. So it's very strong growth in various parts of the world. And then if you kind of look at and rank it, so the way I look at it, I look at the big countries, India, Mexico, Japan, Canada, France, those countries, and then I put the rest of the world in. And then I just layered it, US is in the bottom half in terms of RevPAR. RevPAR in the US was up 1.9% in February. That wasn't, that was pretty good. We were the last of the growth market regions or growth countries and regions, because underneath us was the UK at minus 0.8%, Spain at minus 2%, Australia at minus 3.3%, and then our friends in China minus 8.3%. Some of that is the change in the Lunar New Year celebration. So we think some of that was caused by, again, the movement of calendars in that part. If you look at year to date for the globe, it's a little better. It's at 6.2%. But again, that's because you had a less of a decline in China and then really strong growth in Mexico, Japan, India, Middle East, Latin America, rest of Europe. I mean, all double-digit gains above 10% in RevPAR. But again, the U.S. is toward the bottom, not that bad at 3.1%. Worse than us was Australia, Germany, UK, and China. So lots of moving pieces. Again, it's not just one country or one world. You have to really dissect every market and see what's going on. But overall, year to date, the world is doing pretty good. And getting to the U.S. overall, after 2 months of ADR growth above 3%, February's ADR growth slowed to 1.4%. And that's what brought that RevPAR down to 1.9, right? So again, we're still 3.1. And again, 3.1 year-to-date RevPAR is much better than we were a year ago at 1.1%. So maybe some of the optimism we're hearing from certain parts of the industry is like, wow, the data looks really good. It is better than it was a year ago, RevPAR. But as we've talked about in this podcast, you've got to really peel back the onion. So I've created a metric called core hotels. Core hotels are those that are not in markets or core markets. Let's call it core markets because it's not hotels. Core markets, no hurricane impact. There are 13 markets with hurricane impacts.
Right.
There are 4 markets we identified in the LA area, the greater LA area, due to fires. And then we also identified 5 markets that were impacted by events that either shifted or occurred. For example, Washington, D.C., the inauguration really pushed January results.
Mm-hmm.
Conversely, the movement of Super Bowl from Las Vegas to New Orleans really skewed results. So there's 5 of those markets that we've just set aside and call them special event markets,
Okay.
put away. So core markets, what's happening in the core markets? Actually, RevPAR was up 2.9%. So for the month of February, that's much better than what we anticipated, right? And what we heard with just the U.S. number. And actually, I'm going to check that as we're talking about that because this is live and we have the data just became live.
This just in.
Yeah, this
Hot
just
off the presses.
I just want to make sure that this is February and I'm not making this up as we go along and my notes are wrong, but let's find out. Let's check here. But yes, we're stammering a little bit. Here we go. All right. For
Hey,
February,
that's live radio,
that's
people.
live radio. And it's, again, this data just became live, as you know, this morning. So it's all brand new data. Actually, it's a little better than what I said. For February, it's 3.6% RevPAR growth for these core markets. But what's really driving it, and I thought was really more interesting to me, was the top 25 where RevPAR grew 5.7%.
Top 25 of the core markets or top 25 including
It's the
the
remaining,
outliers?
good question. Remaining top 25, of which are
Okay.
17, because again, we're moving markets around and slicing and dicing. Great. Thanks for reminding me. It's 17 of the top 25. But 5.7% is really darn good. So again, even though, again, I'm not gloom as we started out this thing, but these numbers, right now, top 25 are doing great. If you're in the top 25, you're doing pretty well. If you're in the other markets in February, you also had a decent um, year or month so far because they're up at 2.4. So now he's looking at me because he's been, how can that be? How can you have removed all that? Folks, if you could see Jan, he's giving me the evil eyes because he thinks all my data, he goes, something is wrong with the data. What happened was within those special market categories for February was Las Vegas. Why did Las Vegas sink in February? Well, again, the Super Bowl. A year ago, it was in Vegas. It's a very large market. They not only did they pull people to go to the actual game, but they actually pulled people to the gambling side of it. So it was a big event. And so the special event markets actually brought down February results by 13, or they were down 13.4% in RevPAR.
So once again, we remind people calendar shifts, event shifts.
And then I thought another interesting thing looking at this was a year to date and just thinking about the top 25 or thinking about the 150 markets, which we're calling core. And I really wanted to see what percent, where were they, how they're moving. So 35% or 52 of the 150 actually saw negative RevPAR year to date. 'Cause this is a year to date. And then, you had another 23 that were seeing more than 5% growth. So you're really seeing in total, you're seeing some really interesting movements in markets. So again, going to that core concept, what I thought was really right about the Truist guy, Michael, I can't think of his last name. It is micro markets. You have to look at almost every market. You cannot look at the top line results and get depressed or get happy because you just don't know until you dig into it. So that's, and then finally, just to kind of wrap this up, looking at the chain scales, we saw lots of movements in the chain scales again, and you really have to kind of think about it. Again, tear it all apart. Top line chain scale, February RevPAR was led by luxury, up 8.4%. Again, on ADR. Independents were down minus 2.8%. Again, what caused that? Las Vegas casino hotels, which are mostly still independent. Some have moved into the chain scales, but mostly considered independents. Everyone else for February was up greater than 2%, except upper mid-scale, which was at 1.5%. Looking at year to date, that's similar to February. Strong growth was seen in mid-scale and economy. That was interesting. That was different from just the month of February. So the year-to-date number, you saw a 3.1 and a 4.3% gain in those two chain scales. But then if you break it down and you go into that core chain scale, it was basically, again, driven by hurricane markets. And so if you look at it just year to date for those two markets, core mid-scale is down 0.7% and core economy is only 0.3%. So again, lots of here. I know it's a lot of numbers. You have to look at this and study it a lot. Again, this is our first take.
But
literally,
micro markets.
Micro markets. I think that's going to be the theme this year. And each time we look at the data, we are going to start breaking things apart because I think it's important that when you look at a number, you go, wait a minute, I don't see that, or I'm seeing something better. Well, yeah, you might be, but it just depends where you're at. And that's always been the case. I am reminded of that. But this year, it seems to be more impactful than other times that I recall. And maybe I just don't recall, but I think it is more impactful.
It's telling different parts of the story.
Right.
Yeah, I think the term bifurcation that we used last year very much in terms of the upper end versus the lower end, there seems to be a bifurcation within markets now, and we just have to be very, very mindful of there's the top line, and then you put the asterisk next to it and say, okay, let's take out the hurricane market, let's take out LA, let's take out, and then you get to something that is probably more relevant to the majority of our listeners, to the majority of the attendees here at Hunter, and that's just a lot slower growth.
And the way I think about it is the way we take it out, we're not being just hand picking and say, oh, we're going to take Las Vegas out. Hey, let's take it out. We are looking at we look at the data on a weekly basis, and that's when we notice things. And we obviously, with the Vegas Super Bowl shift to New Orleans, even though New Orleans had a higher RevPAR than Vegas, it was a totally different impact. And that's how we're identifying markets and things, just to make certain that we're just not playing with the data and making it look better.
Never.
Yeah, and
Not
massaging
these
it.
analytical minds.
We
Trust
just-
me.
yeah, we're
the
trying.
data's the data.
The data's the data, but we do think it's important to really think it through. And again, as we look at it weekly, we'll do the same thing with March. We'll look at markets that might be, hey, did an event shift here? And we're not catching every event, Steph. You know that. But we are trying to
Right.
catch those very big events that are market moving and really country moving events. So that's what we're looking for.
Okay, Jan, you are up for a topic of the month, and you're going to take a turn and take us into the luxury realm, a place that you know well.
Yes, he does.
Well,
The
that
private
I-
jets.
That I aspire to know well. I write about it.
You know what?
From
That's the
outside-
first step.
from the
White
outside looking
Lotus
in.
Jan.
Oh, yes. Maybe that was his Phoenix persona.
Maybe that
Okay,
was.
Yeah, no comment. So, what I want to talk about is I have been, for the last couple of months, hearing more and more conversations about third party managers managing luxury hotels. And I think one or two of the large branding companies actually mentioned this in their earnings calls that they are getting away. Well, step one was asset light, where they sold their properties. But it seems like step two is management light, where they're allowing trusted third parties to step in to running luxury properties, which used to be a total no-no. And Ritzes were always managed by Ritz, for example. Well, that seems to be changing slowly but surely. So I just looked at our data over the last 10 years. In 2014, we counted 25 luxury hotels. So call that 8% of the luxury stock managed by third parties. That number had jumped in 2024 to 66, or call that 13%. So roughly a doubling of the percent of luxury properties managed by third parties. And I had, over the last couple of weeks or so, conversation with two very notable CEOs of third party managers, and they're like, yep, we're absolutely leaning into that. Owners want us to lean into that because they're saying, look, let the brands do what the brands do, but let us pick the management company that can then, through economies of scale, manage these properties, certainly to the luxury standards, but deliver maybe a little bit more to the bottom line. So I think that's a super interesting topic, and I don't think that this is just the end of it. I think we're going to see a lot more of that. So I wrote about that on Hotel News Now, and I just thought it was interesting to dig into the brands a little bit. So JW Marriott, Luxury Collection, Unbound Collection from Hyatt, those types of collections, that maybe didn't really have like super strong brand standards to begin with because they were collections. They just allow themselves to be, catered or managed by third parties a little bit easier, and I think we're going to see a lot more of that.
And we have heard it too from the brand perspective. We've noticed that from earnings calls and from talking to brand executives over the last 2 years or so, that there were always typically those, standout brands that the brands would always manage, that they are loosening the grip on that a little bit.
And I think part of that is, if franchising is really the name of the game for the big parent companies and net unit growth is the name of the game, to have a management team on staff is just very unwieldy, and you can't scale that up as quickly. And so they're very happy to let a third party or multiple third parties to step in just in order to get the brands out there.
Yeah, and it's specialization, right? These people know that's all they do is manage hotels, so there's a much more degree of focus than maybe a brand company would have.
So, Isaac, what do you want to dive into a little bit more this month?
Well, that's really interesting. I want to go back to our forecast, even though we didn't change our forecast, and then kind of it speaks to what we've seen in the results so far this year. Is like, so one of the things we did that with all the data we have, now we're starting to break the forecast from the macro view to regions and type of market. So we had the four regions: Northeast, South, Midwest, West, and then type of market, top 25, all others. And eventually we'll break it out even further. But I thought it was just interesting for our listeners to know that, again, what we've seen today in the top 25, what we saw in February, what we've seen year to date, that's what we've predicted. And we believe the Northeast top 25 markets will see the greatest RevPAR growth as we predict, as not as we predicted, but as we forecasted with our January forecast. We think that's still going to hold true. Now, we may revise this when we come around for June, but again, that's where we're going to see the biggest growth. And then we thought the South would also see good growth as well. And those two, like for the Northeast top 25, we were predicting 3.5% RevPAR growth in 25, and for the Southern markets top 25, about 2.1. So again, better than our 1.8. We think that's where again the growth will be concentrated, and then the Midwest and West will be with the drag that brings the country level down. The other thing we've been thinking about is obviously the slowdown in government travel. And so, in the presentation I just did to the IHG Owners Association's board, we kind of broke it down for them as well. We said, so first of all, for the data set, we looked at the HNLA, and in the HNLA, there was actually on their website what percent of revenues came from government travel, and it's about 1.2% of rooms revenues. So again, if I remember correctly, it's either 2 billion or 2.5 billion. I think it was 2.5 billion, if I remember correctly. So having that data, then we started using that with our own data sets, and we started looking at what would happen if there's a 10% cut. What will happen to our RevPAR forecast of 1.8 with a 10% cut in government travel? And we predicted about 0.1% impact. So you go from 1.8 to 1.7. But at a 20%, then you're looking at 30 basis points. And then at a 30% cut, you're looking at 40 basis point cut. So that's just giving you an idea that, again, and this is only one piece. Again, on stage, we were reminded as government travel slows down, so will corporate, because there's a lot of other business.
Sure, interdependencies.
Right. So, but again, this was just looking at the government portion of it. So I think we ought to be mindful that whatever happens in the government, regardless of your stance, if you agree or disagree, it will have an impact on the industry.
There are certain realities that always have an impact on travel, particularly business.
And certain markets will see it more. Washington, D.C., obviously, San Diego, San Antonio, Colorado Springs. So there are certain markets that are very, not only dependent per se, but that really benefit from government travel. So that's what we've been looking at. We're still going to be doing a lot more work against this. But again, it's something just to keep in mind. So that's why, again, that uncertainty.
And to add to that, the government travel, but then also the edict from the White House saying that group travel and other non-essential travel. I thought the wording was super interesting, implying that group travel is not essential. And I was like, wait a second. I think
haven't we been through this before?
Yes, exactly.
Showed us anything is that groups are really, really important. But so group and other non-essential travel is basically banned from all groups in the government. So it's going to be super interesting to see what the impact is specifically on DC.
And we're seeing it now, or hearing about it. I was with another client who told me that they were seeing very deep cuts in government group business. And then an individual I had lunch with today said there was a conference scheduled for San Diego that was supposed to have 5,000 attendees, and it's been cut to 400 attendees. Not 4,000, 400. I don't know wouldn't give me any more specifics, but I thought that was really interesting. So again, that's a space we're going to have to watch, because that will, again, impact the demand side, which will then impact the RevPAR piece.
Yeah, and last comment, I heard from some sales directors that the government is trying to get out of the contracts they already signed by calling this force majeure. Whoa. And invoking basically an act of God. So I don't know if they're implying that Elon Musk is an act of God.
The force majeure definition has gotten very flexible in recent years.
Yeah, the lawyers from those companies are certainly saying, no, you're just canceling a contract. You still have to pay up what you owe us. Right. But either way, that group is not coming back. They're absolutely cutting it now, and then they will not come back for the foreseeable future. So I think this will definitely have an impact also for upper upscale and upscale type hotels.
Lots of bookmarks to put into this conversation and come back to. let's end on, dare I say, a positive note. It is time for this episode's metaphor. You all know it and love it. Isaac usually gives us a song. Jan gives us a who knows what it might end up be, whether it's sledding down a hill or Halloween candy or a lemonade stand. How do you feel right now about the hotel industry at this moment in time, Jan?
Obviously, two-word answer: March Madness.
Did you just
Shout
look
out.
at the TV screen?
I'm totally distracted. We're sitting up here in the Hunter Hotel Investment Conference, and behind us is this huge television screen, and there's basketball going on left and right. Shout out to Alabama State, that was part of the first four last night and won against St. Francis 70-68 last night.
We are learning so much. He lived in Phoenix, likes basketball. Where?
Well, we know he's always liked basketball, but we're going to really have to dig in on a future episode. So March Madness? Madness.
Clearly, the way that the presentations went this morning and what you hear, the tenor of this conversation between Isaac and me, I think madness. Is
Uncertainty. You never know who gets knocked out.
Yeah, exactly. Who's going to be a Cinderella?
And who's going to win the dance at the end of the day? Isaac, what's yours?
I'm taken back. I don't know what to do. I still believe in the resiliency. I can't speak today. Have you noticed that?
Resiliency.
I cannot speak. My mouth is really dry, but of the industry. And so I was thinking back of even in January of where the industry was going and what I was doing. And I got the pleasure and the honor to be able to see Mr. Ringo Starr when he put out his new country album, Look Up, at the Ryman. And that song, Look Up, just speaks to me. And I think that's what we have to remember. This is the optimistic Isaac who will remain optimistic during these turbulent madness times. But I thought it just, it's a long way down and there's no bottom. You had the blues, but you forgot them. Look up in the midnight hour. Look, and it just keeps going on. I think that's just, look up. Just look up. Life will be good. We're here at the Marriott Marquis.
Look up at the TV.
Yeah, look up at the TV. Look up at this beautiful hotel.
Basketball.
And it's going, we just got to stay positive. What we have no control. We can only control what we can control. And things will get better, even if it gets a little harder at the moment, but it always comes back. This industry always comes back.
Hey, isn't that always the truth? Thank you both for your insight, and thank you to our listeners. Find the latest global hotel industry news on hotelnewsnow.com. And of course, find this podcast wherever you like to listen. If you found us already, thank you. Give these guys both follows on LinkedIn, and see you next time.
Thanks, Steph.
Until next time.
Hi, I'm Davon Reed.
I'm Omari Head.
And I'm Chris Henry.
We're the hosts of the Next Gen and Lodging podcast on the Hotel News Now podcast network. It's a monthly show in which we interview a new generation of hoteliers to get their insights into a variety of disciplines and topics, from finance to food and beverage and hotel operations. Listen to us on Spotify, Google, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
This episode of Tell Me More was recorded on March 19th, 2025 by Stephanie Ricca and edited by Rachel Daub. Look for this and more out of the Hunter Hotel Investment Conference at hotelnewsnow.com.